welcome to Lunch and Learn. Hooray. I forgot, Joy mentioned that no one can actually hear the noise anyway, so it's a shame. That means that every single week when we do this, everyone thinks that I'm just sitting in front of an empty crowd. But there we go, we've actually got millions of people on Zoom today. So welcome to one and all. Welcome to everyone watching on Facebook. Here we go with Lunch and Learn for another week. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Parshat. It is Parshat Devarim. It is the start of the final book of the Torah. You know what that means, guys? If we're into the final book of the Torah, it means it's going to be Rosh Hashanah and Simchat Torah very, very soon. We are a couple of months away from Simchat Torah, which means we're a bit less than that away from Rosh Hashanah. But there we go. The book of Devarim covers the last 36 days of Moshe Rabbeinu's life. And in the last few weeks of his lifetime, he is preparing the children of Israel for life in Eretz Yisrael. As we know, he's not going to be able to go in with them. And so he wants to get them ready. It's the big pep talk. It's the final showdown before he sends them on their way into the land to fend for themselves. And fending for themselves means a lot of different things. There's going to be a lot of new mitzvot that they're going to have to do. Such as growing their own food. They haven't had to grow their own food. They've been living on manna all of this time. And so he is getting them ready for all of the different things that are going to be relevant. How the flow of history and how the flow of society can go if they do the right things, and how it may go if they do the wrong things. He actually starts off in this week's parsha by reminding them of some of the mistakes that they've made over the last 40 years. For example, talking about the decision to send spies in to scout the land of Israel, which actually, what's the word? Provoked, which actually activated, which actually caused them to have to spend those 40 years in the desert. As you remember, said on a few occasions, it was supposed to be a very swift, brisk process to get to the actual land, but they ended up making that mistake, and that cost them 38 years extra in the desert. He actually skips over 38 years of history and chooses to focus on things that happen at the beginning, things that happen in the end, much in the way that the Torah does anyway. And he mentions the battles that they have won so far, battling Sichon and Og. Talks about the decision that we read about recently for Reuven, Gad, and half of the tribe of Manasseh, who are going to be staying on the other side of the Jordan River. So Devarim really paves the way now, guys. The home stretch, going through all of the different societal implications that are going to come their way as they settle into life in the land of Israel. And that all starts in this week's parasha. Incidentally, or tangentially, maybe perhaps, not coincidentally, the focus on the decision for the scout, the focus on the scouts, the spies, bringing back the negative report, which prompted the 40-year punishment. It's famously recorded in the Talmud that the night on which everybody started to panic was Tisha B'Av. And it's no coincidence that Parashat Devarim, therefore, is read in such close proximity to Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av, the fast of the 9th of Av, will be on Sunday, Saturday night, leading into Sunday. The Rabbi will be circulating all of the different things that we need to know to be able to navigate starting Tisha B'Av on Saturday night and leading into Sunday. There's going to be a very busy program over Sunday. You should be able to access everything online if you're not able to be there in person. The Kinot readings that we do for most of Sunday morning will be streamed here to the YouTube channel. So lots of opportunity to get involved. It's not a happy day, it's our saddest day. It's a day of reflection, it's a day of contemplation. It can be hard hitting, but quite rewarding. and engaging and interesting. So do feel free to tune in at any point during the Tisha B'Av program on Sunday. And that's all for our summary. Any comments or questions before moving on to Pirkei Avot? Rita?
Yeah, hi. I
Paul.
read a very interesting article about what if we have Jerusalem, which we're now able to go to, and if we have the area where the temple was, what we actually don't have is the will to build a new temple. And if, therefore, what we're actually not celebrating, the days that are coming where we're so sad, are actually not quite right anymore, because we actually have got Jerusalem. And if the money was there, and if we could, if the will was there, we could actually rebuild the temple. And so those days that we were unable to get there, yes, certainly. But there is a whole sort of little bit of thinking going on there that maybe it's not inappropriate, but just a bit different now. We really don't need those days. Actually, what we need is let's get on with it and build a temple, which is what we're all trying to do. There had to be certain conditions before the temple was built. Yeah. Is that not right?
Where was the article?
I think it was out of Lord Sax's office.
I haven't read it.
I think it was out of Jonathan Sax's office.
So I'll
try and find.
I've got this that I printed off. His ceremony and celebration. I haven't had a chance to read it yet.
Yeah, no, it may or may not be there. I'm not quite sure. I'm now of an age where I'm allowed to forget whether I read it.
Well, I print off all of his stuff. I like to stay abreast of it so that if you ask me a question from it, I might know what it's talking about. But I haven't had a chance to read this week's yet, so so hopefully I'll get there. But
does it make any sense to you, the comment?
So I mean, it doesn't make sense that we could go and build the temple now if we wanted to. There's it's not as straightforward as that. And actually we had the temple in our hands. That was what happened in the 6-Day War, 1967.
Indeed, I was there.
I can't. What, you were fighting in Israel at the time?
I was in Israel, and about a week after we got to Jerusalem, I went with some soldiers, and I was actually in Jerusalem, not fighting, that's for sure. But it was went through the little hole to get into the thing, and look, this is the wall. The wall as we see it now is a huge, area that people can go in and see. But when they first got it, it was nothing like that.
You were there?
Very blessed to be there.
Were you actually in Israel during the 6-Day War, or you went out immediately after?
Immediately, yeah. The week after I went out.
Wow. Guys,
yeah.
We've got a VIP in our midst.
There were still bodies everywhere. It was really, the fighting in Khan Yunis and around there, Gaza and all those sort of places were quite horrendous. And I went out with somebody who drives tanks.
Wow, that's incredible. So just to recap to everybody watching on Facebook and YouTube, because Joy reminded me that no one could hear, Paul was saying, first of all, that he was in Israel, in Jerusalem, at the end of the 6-Day War, and he was standing at the Western Wall days after it being captured, which is just mind-bogglingly impressive. So before I get on to the other thing that Paul was saying, I remember when actually no, I won't. Paul was saying we've got Jerusalem now. We could build the temple. It's just that we don't have the will. We've got the means, we've got the finance, everything is there, ready for us to build it. We just haven't built it, which I'm not sure is entirely accurate. The story goes that when we captured the Kotel, all of the soldiers were like, the temple is in our hands, the temple is in our hands. Rav Goren, who was the rabbi of the IDF, came along with a shofar. He was blowing the shofar there on the Temple Mount. They had the option. They could tear down everything that was there. And he huskened and said that we're not able to do that. We're not able to tear down the temple, the mosques. And that is why the decision was was never made for that to be able to happen. I think I don't know the ins and outs, Paul, but it's not merely that we haven't, what do they say? Um, what is it? A camel is just a car by committee or something like that. Is that right? Or a horse by committee? Can anyone help me with the
Something
phrase
like
over
that.
here? A camel is just a horse by committee.
No,
No one's
can't
ever
think of the
heard that
exact
before.
phrase.
So it's not just like everyone got around the table to discuss what the Beis Hamikdash would look like, and because committees are so ineffective that they haven't been able to design one yet. Um, that's not the reality. Um, and we have to wait for I guess I don't really know, more of a divine indication that the time has come for the third temple to be rebuilt. There's even opinions that say the third temple won't even need to be rebuilt; it will actually miraculously descend from the sky. Um, so the ins and outs, I don't know, um, but I'm fairly
Fair enough.
confident.
I only wanted to mention it.
No, no, no. It's otherwise we all just sit here wondering like, well, what the heck's going on? I mean, I know how difficult it. There we go. A camel is a horse designed by committee. Thank you, Gary. Don't know why you had to tell me that in Japanese, but very, very much appreciated. So,
To me, Rabbi, to
yeah,
me that wood is symbolic. If they were built it'll never be the same atmosphere. I mean, kids go there for the bar mitzvahs and being called up. I think it's just symbolic. It's just something about that wall. I think personally, if it was rebuilt one day, I don't think it will have the same effect.
well, it will, because when the temple is rebuilt, and everybody recognizes that God runs a world, we will be ready for it. People will go there for bar mitzvahs, and it'll be way better than doing it at the kotel. It's going to be a completely different reality when the temple is rebuilt. And some of the things that we've been seeing about what an amazing spectacle it must have been for people to go and visit the temple. That none of that will be lost. In fact, if anything, it will be, more amazing. So I guess in answer to the question, Paul, about why we're still going through this if we've got Jerusalem, part of tapping into the day of Tisha B'Av and part of the tapping into the morning is that to have an appreciation of what we've actually still not got, which is very, very hard to do because Jerusalem is a very beautiful city. The old city is a very beautiful place to be. Israel is a very beautiful country with a lot of lovely hotels, and a lot of lovely restaurants. But the angle for mourning, the angle for crying and for weeping, is the fact that we think that that's where it should be at. It's the fact that we think that Israel is in its completed state now. That's why we still need Tisha B'Av. Because
Why isn't it?
when the temple is rebuilt and when the Mashiach comes, we're not going to be in any danger. There's not going to be any terrorism. There's not going to be any battles. There's not going to be any war. There's not going to be any viruses. There's not going to be any pandemics. There's not going to be any anti-Semitism. There's not going to be any illness. So we're mourning over the fact that we think that this is as good as it can get, and it's not.
Great.
Yeah, and 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 the if we can't if we can't weep and mourn over that, then we can mourn and weep over the fact that we don't understand what that means. Um, so it still has its place because either we feel the void or the gulf between where we are now and what we have then. So we're either mourning over feeling that, or we're mourning over not feeling that. But either way, that's why we need Tisha B'Av. Gary, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I was thinking the temple and Jerusalem and all that is really just a side thing. What we're really mourning is our loss of relationship with God and the fact that he took the temple away, his home, from us. So it's our relationship with God more than the building or anything else. And we're not going to get that temple back until he gives it to us.
Mm-hmm.
We don't build it, he builds it. We build it by no longer eating treif and being cruel to each other and having we're waiting for the Messiah, and when that comes, then we get it back. But that's just a side thing. It's our relationship with God that we lost and we're trying to repair.
A beautiful point as well. No one on Facebook or YouTube heard it. Gary was saying that.
Good.
Gary was saying that what we are also focusing on is our relationship with God, and how the fact that all of this is being withheld from us is because we have to do our bit too. We have to recognize the areas that we need to repair and mend and improve our relationship with God. And then when we're deserving, he will give us the temple. So thank you for that, Gary. Yes, this is going to be quite tricky, isn't it, to relay everybody's messages. But whatever, no one's watching on Facebook anyway, so
Joy is.
well, that's the thing. As long as Joy's internet doesn't crash, everyone's hearing it. Okay, so here we go, guys. Pirkei Avot. We are going to be doing Mishnah 14. On the screen, it is Mishnah 11. And we're still in the fours. I'll spotlight myself for everyone so you can see on the screen. Would anybody please like to read the Mishnah for today?
I'll start. There are 4 kinds of temperaments: easy to become angry and easy to be appeased. His gain disappears in his loss. Hard to become angry and hard to be appeased. His loss disappears in his gain. Hard to become angry and easy to be appeased. A pious person, easy to become angry and hard to be appeased. A wicked person.
Thank you very much, Peter. So we've got Arba Midot B'deot. There are 4 kinds of temperament. We're going to be focusing on the reaction to adversity and to the handling of anger. And so the Mishnah is telling us that there are 4 different types of temperament, 4 different ways in which we react to external stimuli. As we've said before, anger is one of the only traits, if not the only trait, that we really have to tame completely. A lot of times we say we have to reach a golden mean, a golden medium in the way that we approach life. We've talked about this before in terms of generosity versus stinginess. You can't be completely stingy, but neither can you be completely generous in that you give everything of yours away. You have to find a happy middle ground. Anger is the one trait that we're taught where there's really no place for it. You know, except in extremely exceptional circumstances, we should never be getting angry. And we've discussed sources in the past that talk about what a curse anger can be to a person's life. And so we really have to work very hard across our lifetimes to be able to tame the beast, because otherwise life can be unbearable if you are an angry person. Now it's interesting because it doesn't say that there are 4 types of people, that there is an angry person, a slightly angry person, a non-angry person. It says that there are 4 types of temperament, and perhaps this is because fundamentally we believe that it is possible to change your temperament. If we were to say there are 4 types of people, you got one guy who's ridiculously angry all of the time, he always walks around with a frown on his face, he's grumpy, he's moody, you can't talk to the guy. So then we would say, well, okay, that's how he's built, that's how he is. You can't change what you can't change. If you don't like it, lump it. This is who I am. I can't change, and then I don't have to be responsible for anything that I do in my fit of anger. I don't have to be responsible or held accountable for what I say, for what I do, for how I treat people. So that's who I am. I'm an angry person. I'm hard to. I'm easy to get angry, and I'm hard to calm down afterwards. That's just who I am. So the Mishnah already starts off by telling us you don't get out of it that easily. There are different types of temperament, and sometimes you are more, or very often, you can be more drawn towards the worst types of temperament, but it's all within our remit and it's all within our power to change. So, those are just some starting points there of of this Mishnah. Just another piece as well. There's a famous statement, famous quote from the Midrash. In Hebrew, it says, "Adam nikar bekiso, bekoso, uvekaaso." A person's character can be determined through their kiso, which is their wallet, their attitude to Mishnah, their attitude to money, which in the previous Mishnah we talked about with what's mine is yours, what's yours is mine, what's mine is his, yeah. So a person's character can be determined through his wallet, his attitude to giving, bekoso, through his cup, which is their behavior when they've had a bit too much to drink and they let their guard down. What are they really like when you peel away the layers? With a ka'aso, and in his anger, when being provoked, how do they react? That's how you really get to see a person's true colors. And we all go through adversity, and so we're all tempted and we're all tested in these areas. But how do we react? So, initial comments and questions about this Mishnah, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm a bit confused about the easy to become angry, easy. Yes, sir. I'm okay with the pious one. I'm okay with the wicked one. I understand those; they're quite clear.
Okay.
But the other two are a bit confusing.
Yeah,
Okay,
personally,
so just for Facebook and YouTube, we've had a comment here that the first two are very confusing. The second two are very easy to understand. First two are confusing. We'll get there. Yeah, Martin.
My Mishnah translates the word that costs as to easy to provoke, but easy to pacify.
Yes.
Somebody who you can provoke them, but very quickly they understand that they're wrong or that they've made a mistake,
and they can calm down again.
The next one is someone who's difficult to anger or pacify, but once they're entrenched. They won't change their mind. They won't listen to reason. So the first person is not such a bad guy anyway, or lady. You know, they might get angry quickly, but you can easily talk to them and they forgive or change or understand. So that I don't think the first person that they're talking about is such a terrible thing. I mean, it would be lovely if they didn't get angry quickly, but they easily understand they've been wrong.
So it's interesting because it says in the Mishnah, let's go through it now. No, Joe, you wanted to say something? You're muted though. So not only can Facebook not hear you, but none of us can hear you.
When you have an obstinate person, they just are like they're obstinate and angry and always ready to argue. You usually find that because they are insecure, so you should have compassion for them. I don't say they're wicked. You may, they're just insecure, so they have to hit out first.
So a person who is easy to provoke and gets angered very easily, but also takes a long time to calm down. You're saying that what that I'm
talking about the last one, easy to become angry and hard to be appeased.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say they were wicked. No. I would just say that they are insecure and something's happened to make them like that. They want to hit out.
So the fact that they can't calm down, the fact that they can't.
So they need compassion, not.
Well, there's nothing to say that you can't give compassion to a wicked person.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say they are wicked. It says here they're a wicked person. I wouldn't say they were wicked.
Okay.
You don't know what's happened in their childhood or to make them like that.
Okay. Well, let's explore all of these four a little bit, and let's see how we go. So let's start with the first one. Noach lichos v'noach lirtzot. The person is easy to provoke. He gets angry easily. The slightest trigger, and he or she will have their outburst. But it's short-lived, and they will calm down, and life will go back to its equilibrium quite rapidly. So it's a short outburst. But the Mishnah says that the loss is going to outweigh the gain. Meaning, it's a good thing that they calm down quickly, but that's offset by the fact that another outburst is going to be around the corner at any moment because they're triggered so easily. So it's lovely that they calm down again, but the peaks and troughs will come so frequently because of the fact that it doesn't take much to trigger them. So in such an instance, life is pretty hellish. If someone is constantly lapsing into acts of aggression, acts of violence, offensive insults, outbursts of anger, and this is happening regularly, so there's no telling what damage that can cause. And for everybody who is the victim of that anger, it's going to be Gehenna, as they say. It's going to be hell, because you can't live around someone like that who's constantly being provoked and making life unbearable with their anger. Even if they are able to calm down, as we said, another outburst is around the corner. So the Mishnah is saying that your benefit is the gain, the benefit of the fact that you can calm down easily is almost irrelevant, because you're just going to flare up again. So that's the first point in our Mishnah. A person who is easy to provoke but easy to calm down again, the benefit of calming down is offset by the fact that he gets angry so easily. Rita, yes, over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, if we take children, let's say 2 years old, we call them tantrums.
Yeah.
They usually get very, very agitated for whatever reason it is. They call it the terrible twos. So obviously they go in that category, isn't it?
Well, they might do, but so Rita's saying that children are like this. They have tantrums, they flare up very quickly, and then they calm down again, and then life goes back to normal, and everyone's their best friend.
That's right.
So very much so. That could be the proclivity of a toddler, of a child. But we don't want to be in that situation when we're in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, etc. If we're still in that mindset of being like a child who tantrums and throws their toys out of the pram every time something goes wrong, then we know that we've not worked hard enough at it. We're supposed to be developing beyond the behaviors of children and the maturity levels of children. So it's an excellent point. We can't fault them for it. As we said, all of these temperaments in many ways are understandable, and in many ways will be subject to the upbringing, the surroundings, the triggers, the temptations. Psychologically, these things all make sense, and these things may manifest in our psyche at different times. But we have to understand the cost of being easily provoked. The cost of being easily provoked is that you can often say the wrong thing, and you can often make a scene, and you can cause people harm, and you can cause people damage. So we have to learn to manage our temperament, and we have to learn to grow beyond a 2-year-old's temper tantrums. And if we don't, then we make life very difficult for everybody around us. So that's the first one. The second one says the Mishnah, kasher lichos v'kasher lirtzot. It takes a lot to get this person angry, but when they do, boy, is it hard for them to calm down afterwards. They can be so calm, they can be so stable, their equilibrium can be so balanced. But if there is that trigger or that culmination or combination of triggers, then the way in which they explode could last a heck of a long time. In such an instance, though, the Mishnah says, his loss disappears in his gain. It's far better the fact that in general this person is very placid and calm and easy to be around. The fact that they're able to be like that most of the time, yes, fine. If they're really, really pushed to the very, very edge, then it's very, very uncomfortable to be around. But generally speaking, they are able to rein it in. So in such an instance, the Mishnah says there's more to be gained by being generally calm than there is then that will trump how difficult it might be for them to calm down afterwards. So comments or questions on that particular one?
This one I find a bit more difficult than the first.
Yeah.
Because first one, somebody gets angry more often, but it doesn't last all that long. The second one doesn't get angry very often, but it's hard to define how long it's going to take for him to calm down. If it goes on for days, that can be more damaging to somebody than the one who gets angry but calms down very quickly.
You mean if their fit of rage is long lasting, then that would be extremely difficult to live around as well. It's interesting. I hadn't thought of it like that. I see myself at times being a bit like this as well. That, with the exception of my children, right? Unless I am, it can take a lot to provoke me. I remember when I first got married, and I was a very calm person back then. Boy, was I a calm person. Nothing could get me. But I had a very difficult situation to navigate with my former roommates. And I remember that I was having a heated discussion with them outside of shul, and they really, really said many, many hurtful things, and it really provoked me, and I belted at them. And I came home to share it afterwards, and I was shaking at it had taken such a long time to kind of tip over the edge. But after I did, I couldn't settle for hours afterwards because of how intense the flare up had been. It doesn't happen anymore because now my kids come home, they throw their shoes on the floor, and I'm yelling at them to go and put them away. I'm very easy to be provoked, very easy to be triggered now. But back then it was a scary thing. So I see Peter's point that it can be extremely difficult to live around someone if their fit of rage is very long lasting. I guess in my mind it had meant more that you find it hard to shake off the feeling of anger towards someone. So you might not be walking around smashing the walls in for days or for hours, but you can't shake off the impact of your emotion, of your anger, of how it flared up. It takes a long time for it to wear off and to let bygones be bygones and to forget about it. We've seen how many families can be destroyed, damaged forevermore on account of harboring grudges and resentment and anger towards people for something that may have happened a long time ago. And if you don't shake it off, if you don't find a point of resolution, then life will never be the same again. So it's interesting. I guess it's whether we're talking about that peak of anger, or whether we're talking about the residual effect of the anger, and how long that can go on for. So yeah, I can see how there would be different ways of looking at this, and what it means on a practical basis. So thank you for that, Peter. Any more comments or any more questions?
I was just going to comment. There's an awful lot about anger in Pirkei Avot. Several of the lyrics mention anger.
Yeah.
Like who is mighty? He who controls his passions. Well, that's one.
Yeah.
You know, there's quite a lot on anger, so it must be important.
There are sources in the Talmud that that correlate anger with worshipping of idols. You know, say a person
With
who
what?
worshipping idols, avodah zarah. A person who
Bad?
is angry is like an idol worshipper. A person who gets angry, all forms of Gehenna, all forms of hell rule over someone who gets angry. A person who gets angry loses his wisdom. You know, there's a lot of. In fact, I'll show you this. I've got two books here, the equivalent of self-help books on managing and controlling one's anger. I actually got a third one, which is thinner than this, but that's one of them. And this first chunk of the book goes through many different sources and many different quotes from different places about how damaging anger can be. And this is the second one. This one's even thicker, which is also about anger. I haven't gone through it yet. I'm too angry to even open it. But here as well, I'm guessing would also be a lot of things to say on how bad anger really is and how it can ruin our lives. So there you go. Self-help books on anger, even in the Jewish literature. Why was I saying all that? Yeah, because it's really bad. It's really bad.
I just commented
Yeah.
that there was a lot of anger in Pirkei Avot.
That's it. I'm so angry at you for commenting on that, Joe. So then the third one is kasher lichos v'noach lirtzot. A person is hard. It's difficult to provoke him or her. But when they are provoked, they will also calm down, and like water off a duck's back, they will calm down pretty easily afterwards in full control of their emotions. Now, it's in a couple of things that we have to pick up on here. Number one, the Mishnah doesn't say that a person who never, ever, ever gets angry, that's where we're going for, right? It's interesting, no? It doesn't say never, ever, 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 ever get angry. It says that if you're going to get angry, make sure that it takes a lot, that you're hard to anger. That's what we're aiming for, that it's hard to make us angry. And that's because fundamentally, two things. Fundamentally, it's a human emotion which people have. And secondly, there are things for which it is appropriate to get angry. We are taught that we should hate the sin and not the sinner. Right? When we see someone doing something wrong, it should stir an emotion inside of us. If we see somebody creating a chilul Hashem, setting a bad example for the Jewish people, so we should feel anger. We should feel something inside of us. If we're emotionally dead to wrongdoing, that's not a good place to be. We are supposed to feel something when people behave inappropriately, when people behave badly, when wrong is being committed in our surroundings, in our society, in our community. in our home, we are supposed to take a stand. But the emotion that we show should come from a place of control. It's within the confines of halacha to show anger to a child, right? If they are doing something wrong, and to show an act of anger is going to be an appropriate way to discipline them, then that's within the confines of halacha. But when we show anger, when we raise our voice, when we hit our fist on the table, whatever it might be, to show that we're upset with the way that we're behaving, it's not supposed to come from a place of loss of control. It's supposed to come from a place of being in control. You are preparing yourself and exhibiting the display of anger as a way of educating the child, not as a way of you losing control. Now, I don't get this right 98% of the time, right? But a chassid does. A chassid does get it right 98% of the time. Someone who is in control of their anger and in control of their emotions will only show anger when they are prepped for it, and when it is needed, and when it is called for, and when you're doing it because you want to discipline or educate or show the right way, whatever that might, whatever it is that's causing for this display of anger. But it shouldn't be because you've lost control. So it's hard to become angry, which will mean like you may be feeling angry, right? But to demonstrate and display that anger comes from a place of control, comes from a place of restraint, not from a place of losing inhibitions. If you're doing it from a place of losing inhibitions, right, which is the easy to become angry part, right? We lose our inhibitions, we lose control, and the anger comes out. No, the Mishnah is saying it has to be hard to become angry. You might need to show anger, but it should be calculated. It should be thought out. It should be appropriate. It should be measured. It should be controlled. And the second point on this is that it doesn't call this person a tzaddik or a chacham. It doesn't call him a righteous person or a wise person. It uses the word here chassid. Right? A chassid is a pious person. A chassid is actually translated as someone who goes above and beyond the call of duty, or goes beyond the minimum expectation. They work harder as a chassid to do these things. We talked about the chassid last week as well. One who says mine is yours and yours is yours is a chassid. Right? Same word here. You're a chassid. So you don't need to have payas, you don't need to have a beard, you don't need to have a strymel, you don't need to have a bekasha, you don't need to have a shapel, you don't need to have stockings, right? To be a chassid, you have to be someone who is difficult to be provoked, and when they are provoked, they're in control, and they're able to bring themselves back down after to a place of calm, serenity, and control. That's the attribute, the temperament of a chassid. So the flip side of that, the Mishnah says, though, a rasha is someone who is so easy to be provoked, and they are so difficult to calm down. It's really the worst of all of the traits. They can inflict a great deal of harm on themselves and on those close to them. They can be verbally abusive, if not worse. They can be dangerous. They can be volatile. And the Mishnah is saying we don't make excuses for bad behavior. But as Job was pointing out, you have to have compassion for these people as well. You have to work with them. And everybody is capable of changing their temperament. Everybody is capable of working on this. Yes, there are triggers. Yes, there are clearly causes and traumas that have led a person to this state. But first of all, we hold somebody accountable for damage which is caused in a state of anger. So if the worst types of violence and abuse verbal, emotional, sexual, neglect, whatever it might be, if that is happening by a person, we don't just turn around and say, well, they're not accountable for it because you don't know what childhood they had, you don't know what they've had to deal with in life. That's not what we say. A person is accountable. Yes, they need to be counseled. Yes, they need to receive compassion. They need to receive support. They need to receive a lot of things. They need a lot of help to pull them back from this dark precipice. But we don't turn around and say that this person is not a Russia just because they've had a bad upbringing, they've had a bad lot in life. Everybody is able to work on these things. If you really can't control yourself, you could just go and lock yourself away, go and live on your own, and do what you need to do in your own comfort. If you're around other people, then we can't excuse a person's wickedness just because they've had a difficult upbringing. We can't sweep it under the carpet, pretend like it's not there, try and excuse it, say, oh, it's not that bad, he's had a hard day at the office, give him a break. No. If a person is in this kind of predicament, they have to get help. They have to try and help themselves. They have to put themselves in an environment where they're not going to have those outbursts and damage and wound and abuse other people if they are so easy to be triggered. It's a very important thing that we're saying over here. Yeah,
there
Rita.
are anger management courses now, aren't there?
There are anger management courses.
Yes.
And self-help books and all the rest of it. And if a person does criminal damage, then there are legal consequences, aren't there? So, yeah, we obviously have to psychologically take into account where they're coming from. But we can't excuse rishus. We can't excuse wickedness and just say, like, yeah, what do you expect? Yeah, go on, Rita.
Rabbi, can I say something?
Please.
And sometimes to be angry towards a child is not a bad thing. You tell the kid off. I mean, you've been annoyed, he's doing something very, very naughty. You tell him off, getting angry. I mean, I don't know, I can't even give examples in the past about my own children.
I can. Not about your children, but about mine.
Unless you get angry, they understand that it really isn't, it's serious.
Yeah.
If I say, oh yeah, but please don't do this again, I don't think they get the message.
Yeah, so I agree with you. And that's what we're saying, is that there are occasions with children or with adults where displaying anger is a necessary part of the discipline and a necessary part of their education. But the level that we need to try and reach for is where it's in a controlled environment and where it's measured and where it's not as a result of a loss of control.
I just looked up the definition of anger. There's 3 different types, it says here. Passive aggression, open aggression, and assertive anger. So I suppose the passive aggression is the one we're all trying to aspire to, and that's easier to overcome. Something to avoid is open aggression and assertive anger.
Yeah.
Which I suppose is some sort of physicality involved.
Yeah. Yeah. So what were the 3? Passive aggression.
Passive aggression,
open aggression, and expressing anger.
We googled it. Anger.
But it doesn't say it's the 100%.
Yeah.
It's just interesting different types of aggression.
Absolutely. There is even sources in halacha to say that a person can strike a child to discipline. We talk now about how it's never okay to hit a child. According to halacha, it actually is. It's just that nowadays, almost all rabbis and poskim and halachic decisors will say that this is actually something that we shouldn't practice anymore. But the concept of disciplining children is talked about in halacha, and it has evolved over time. We have a mitzvah in the Torah of hocheach tochiach. There is a mitzvah in the Torah of rebuking someone, of correcting and pointing out their behavior if it's wrong or inappropriate or immoral or incorrect or forbidden or whatever it might be. There is a mitzvah that we have to do, but there are also many guidelines to that mitzvah, and how one must talk to somebody, whether they're a child or an adult, whether they're your relative or whether they're your friend or whether you've never met them before. There's a whole load of guidelines on how to actually perform this mitzvah. But fundamentally, what I'm trying to say is these things exist. The concept of rebuking someone, remonstrating someone, is that a word that I want to use in this context? Showing anger, it's all talked about in Jewish law and in Jewish behavior. But I guess the most important thing is that these things are supposed to be done from a point of mindfulness, from a point of kavanah, from a point of self-control, self-awareness, self-discipline, and not on account of other emotions being mixed into it. If you are lashing out at someone because they have slighted your honor, right, that's not coming from a place of self-control. That's coming from a very reactive stance of your ego prompting an outburst, which is not the same as remonstrating somebody who has upset you, and talking to someone who has upset you, communicating with someone who has upset you, but it's coming from a place of control, and it's coming from a place of discipline. It can be two very different experiences. So yeah, Paul, you just turned on your camera. Does that mean you've got something to say now? Or does that mean you just finished your lunch?
No. I've got trouble with my eyes and I can't watch the screen.
Ah.
That was all.
Ah. I wouldn't want to look at me either for an hour.
Oh dear.
But there we go. Let's leave it there for today, ladies and gentlemen. That's all we've got time for, basically, and the questions and comments have dried up. So we'll take an opportunity to wish you all a wonderful, meaningful day.